players, it's Mr. Maynard here. First of all, I wanted to say that I am so excited to start the year, and I can't wait to see what we accomplish this year. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. Super excited. I'm primarily making this video to introduce to the 6th graders how to properly maintenance your trumpet, and to remind the 7th graders and the 8th graders how to properly maintenance your trumpet. In this video, we're going to talk about how to properly oil your valves and how to properly grease your slides. So the first process that I'm going to show you how to do is how to properly oil your valves. And this part of the process is very important and crucial, because if you have not functional valves or sticky valves, then you aren't going to be able to play what you want to in band class or what you want to play at home. So we have to take very good care of our valves. And before we get started, I wanted to say that it's a good idea to do this one time about every 2 or 3 days. And that's going to get you the most success in taking care of your valves. So first, what you're not going to need during this process is a mouthpiece. So you can go ahead and keep that in your trumpet case. But what you will need is your valve oil that came with your trumpet, the valve oil that you have. So let's go ahead and try to open it. Turn it to the left, and you're going to find that it won't open. And there's a reason for this. It's a safety precaution that the valve oil manufacturers do. And so what you're going to want to do is put some muscle into it, and how you open it is you push down and turn to the left at the same time, and then that's going to get your valve oil opened. So that's kind of the preliminary step to this process, is just open your valve oil and set it to the side. So that's done with. So I've broken this down into 5 easy steps, and so the first step that you're going to want to do is just take your trumpet out of your case and set it on your lap. And there's a reason that I'm setting it on my lap, and that's because that's what we're going to be doing in band class. But when you're at home, it's sometimes easier to do this process on the floor because you have more workspace. So, but we can't do that in the band room because we don't really have that much space, especially when everyone is in here for class. So we're going to do this on our lap. So that's step 1, taking your trumpet out of your case. Step 2 is you're going to unscrew the valve. And first I'll show you the 3 parts of the valve. It's the valve casing, that's what the valve sits in, the top valve cap, which is the part that we're going to be unscrewing, and then the button on the top, the valve button. And the valve button is shiny and it looks kind of like a pearl, and that's what we're not going to be unscrewing, because if you unscrew that, it will fall on the ground and it will start rolling into a very inconvenient place, like under a desk or under the couch or something like that, where it's going to be hard to reach. So we want to make sure, I've done that many times. So what we don't want to do is unscrew this top part, the button. But what we do want to do is loosen this part, the top valve cap. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it to the left and loosen it until it's totally loose. Step number 3 is going to be taking the valve halfway out of the valve casing until you see half of this silver metal part. So I'm gonna bring that halfway out. I'm gonna set the horn back on my lap. Then I'm gonna grab my valve oil and I'm gonna put a few drops on each side of the valve. And once I've done that, step number 4 is pushing the valve back down and moving the valve oil around in the valve casing. So go ahead and turn it. And it's easier if you just turn it to the right so that the button doesn't come loose. Great. So step number 5, the last step, is putting the valve all the way back down. And when you do this, you want to make sure that the number on top of the brass or golden part, there's a number on each of these valves. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3, and I'm doing number 1 right now. So you want to make sure that is facing towards the mouthpiece. And then once that happens, your trumpet valve should lock in and it shouldn't move anymore. And then what you're going to do is screw the top valve casing back on. And then push the valve button down just to make sure it works, and to move the valve oil around just a little bit more. And then after that, you're going to repeat the process with number 2 and 3. And I will say the reason why we don't take the valve all the way out of the valve casing is because It's easier to mix up the valves when you do that. So for instance, if you have the first valve in the valve casing of number 2 or number 3, then your trumpet won't work. You'll go to try to blow air and bust through your trumpet and nothing will come out. Your air stops right here. So we want to make sure that you get the valves in the right order and in the right casing so that your trumpet will work. So that is how to effectively oil your trumpet valves. So the next process that I'm going to show you how to do is how to properly grease your slides. And this is very important because we'll talk about this more in class if we haven't already, but you need your slides to work when we actually play trumpet. We actually move them when you play trumpet. So if your slides won't come out, if they're completely stuck, we send instruments in weekly to Pages Music and they will fix that. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to come to band class and ask myself or Mrs. Mack. So before we get started, I want to show the 6th graders what I mean when I say slides, because there's a lot to a trumpet. So I want to tell you what we're going to be working on today, and that is the main tuning slide, which is the big one with the big water key, and so it's the longest one. The next slide we're going to be working on today is our 3rd valve slide, and that's right here. And to move it, today I'm going to show you that when we grease our slide, our 3rd valve slide, that you have to have all the valves down to move it. And this is your 1st valve slide. We're not actually going to worry about greasing this today, and we'll talk about how to do that in class. So before we get started on this process, you need a few things. The first thing that you need is your slide grease that came with your trumpet. And this looks like this tub or this smaller tub. So the first thing that you need to do as a preliminary process is just open it up and set that to the side. The next thing, the second thing that you need is either a paper towel or an old rag. And I've been doing this for a while, so I use an old rag that I just keep in my trumpet case all the time, but a paper towel works just fine. So I've broken this process up into 9 easy steps. And the first step is to take your trumpet out of your case and put it on your lap. And for this, you do not need a mouthpiece, you only need the trumpet. Before we get started greasing our slides, I'm going to mention to the 7th and 8th graders that it's very smart to look at where your main tuning slide is before you take it out and grease it, because you're going to want to return it to this spot how it looks after we're done. So make sure you take notice of where that is. So step 1, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the main tuning slide out of our trumpet all the way out. And then we are going to, once you have it out, we're going to set it off to the side. And then we're going to grab our slide grease and we're going to put our finger in it, and we're going to get a thin layer about the size of a dime on our finger. And we're going to grab our main tuning slide and we're going to smooth out the grease on both the bottom and the top of the slide until there are no clumps left of the grease. So evenly distribute the grease onto the slide. And we only grease the golden or the brass part of the slide. We don't put any on this part. And you might have a gold trumpet, so this is going to look different, but we only put it on this this metal part that's a different color than the rest of the trumpet. So once we've done that, step number 3 is to put this off to the side again and take your paper towel or rag and wipe the excess grease off of your fingers so you don't get your trumpet all greasy. And then you're going to grab the tuning slide again and then put it back into your trumpet. And once you have it back, you're going to slide it back and forth to even out the grease. And once you're done, you're going to put it all the way back in. And notice I have a bunch of excess grease on here, and so you're going to want to take your paper towel or old rag and wipe all of that away. And then, so now we are done greasing this slide. 7th and 8th graders, this is when I would put the tuning slide back into place where it was before we started. So that was steps 1 through 3, showing us how to grease our main tuning slide, the biggest one. So next we're going to work on how to grease the third valve slide, and I've actually added a few steps to this just to help us when we're playing trumpet, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. So the first step to this is a lot of you, this is step number 4, a lot of you have a third valve slide screw, keeping the third valve slide from falling on the ground, which is a very good thing. Just go ahead and unscrew that just a little bit. You don't have to take it all the way out, just unscrew it a little bit to the point where you can take the valve slide all the way out. And before we do that, I'm going to have us push down all the valves and then take the third valve slide all the way out. So I'm going to put my trumpet on my lap. Step number 5 is going to be putting the slide off to the side, grabbing our slide grease again, and then doing the same thing that we did earlier, getting a little bit on your finger about the size of a dime, a very thin layer, and then applying the grease to the slide. And this one is a little bit different because we have one section on the slide that needs grease. So I'm going to apply a little bit there. And we also have another section on the trumpet that needs grease. And we only grease these 2 sections of this slide. Great, so once I have that all evenly distributed with no clumps of grease left, I'm going to put our third valve slide off to the side so that I can wipe my finger off again. And then step number 6 is going to be putting the slide back in, and remember to push down all the valves. And then notice that as the same with the main tuning slide, I'm going to have some excess grease here, especially after I make it, smooth it in. And then I'm just going to use my paper towel or old rag and get rid of the excess grease again. Great, so now that we've completed number 6, step number 7 is where it gets a little weird, and you might say, why are we doing this? But I've been doing this long enough that I know that these next few steps will really help, even though it's a little bit weird. So what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to go ahead and set your trumpet down on your lap, and for step number 7, you are going to need your valve oil. So go ahead and unscrew your valve oil, and if it's not coming undone, I explained a little bit earlier in the video that you have to push down and turn left at the same time to open that up. So once you get that opened up, set that to the side. And then what you're going to want to do for step number 7 is push your valves down and put your slide out, your third valve slide, out just halfway. We don't need to take it all the way out. And what you're going to do is take your valve oil and you're just going to put a few drops on each portion of the slide. So I'm just going to do a few drops. And put my valve oil back to the side, and then I'm going to mix that in with the slide grease, holding the valves down. Great, and then once I've done that, step number 8 is to wipe the excess grease and valve oil away so that you make your trumpet all nice and shiny. That's what we want. Step number 9 is a very important step, and that's to take your third valve slide screw and tighten it. I don't have one because my trumpet's a little bit different, but your trumpet is most likely going to have one, so make sure you tighten that until it's tight enough to where your third valve slide won't fall to the floor. Awesome, well that's how you appropriately grease your slides.